Welcome back, gentle listeners, to the News Fist interview series. I need a better sort of name for this, but today's special guest is Benjamin Boyce,
Hey,
doyen of the nouveau work right, always Frenjamin, never Benemy. I think is how it goes. Famously rejected by the kosher centrists circa, it was a while ago now, right? But he was cast out. And I have it on very, very good authority that you are now part of a very, very exclusive woke right cult. Is that correct, Ben?
I think so. I was accused of being in a cult, but I don't understand what a cult is. I grew up. My formative years were involved intimately with a cult of the Christian Pentecostal variety back in the early 70s. Mid 70s, early 80s.
Really?
Yeah, and so I'm very keen on what a cult is. Cult of personality, strong leadership. The whole evergreen thing that was culty. Like where everybody has to think the same way, but whatever was happening on the not liberal side of the politically homeless encampment is not culty at all. I mean, I guess Tucker Carlson kind of like weird, Candace Owens look kind of weird, but nobody's necessarily purity spiraling. They are, I don't know about Candace. I don't want to speak for her, but Tucker instigates people's desire to purity spiral.
I don't know. I mean, surely like a purity spiral is different to, I don't know, what would you call it? Like policing the boundary or something like that, right? Like the whole point of a purity spiral is that it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you wind up with the situation of like the last two true communists in Algeria, one of whom killed the other over a chicken because, there wasn't like a true communist. I don't see any of that happening in I don't
liberal
know.
land. True liberalism hasn't been tried. No, because they're too posh. I mean, ultimately, the liberals have what they have going for them is that they are respectable. Even if they were shunned out of the institutions which went woke, they still have that edge on what's respectability.
Do they?
Blank slateist presupposition is just the prevalent morality of our time. You can't get around that. And so any sort of human biodiversity conversation, let alone any sort of ethnic criticism, is always going to be coded as lower class or fashy.
I mean, I see what you're getting at there, but I would argue that the reason why that whole blank slatism thing was able to gain so much traction when it was sort of promoted sort of originally by the Moos was that there wasn't actually like much contact between the majority white population and these minorities. And now that, we have all been forced to live together, cheek to jowl, it's starting to break down. And weirdly enough, it's sort of, I mean, it was never a thing actually among those minority populations themselves, right? Like they never really believed in the blank slatism at all. It was only really the whites who were sort of forced and cajoled and psyoped into believing this idea that everybody was fundamentally the same. Like,
you think it's more social engineering? You don't think that there's you don't think it has to do with the whites, so-called Northwestern Europeans, human biodiversity, like their predilection to exogamy, to universalism, to liberal principles? They're the ones who founded liberalism. So you think that they're genetically
it's certainly
selected for that.
I think you might be right. I think there is a tendency, I don't know, to like damp down. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on who you. I was going to say like there might be a tendency in white populations to dampen down on internal conflict, but I'm not really sure if that's true, right? Like, I mean, you could point to sort of several large conflicts, like inter-ethnic conflicts, the Catholics versus the Protestants, for example.
Yeah. And how were those conflicts solved within Christianity? Liberalism was the protocol by which those conflicts were solved, and it scaled phenomenally well during the colonial and post-colonial early modern period. With the exception of the world wars.
I don't think that's true. I don't think liberalism is what solved it, really. I mean, like, historically, the first thing that solved it was, going all the way back, like the Treaty of Westphalia, was the idea of having Catholic and Protestant countries, right? This was the main outcome of the Treaty of Westphalia, which was who's ruler, whose religion, right? So up until that point, you had a situation where whenever you had countries full of Catholics and Protestants. So whenever a Protestant monarch emerged, all of the Catholics would immediately try and like undermine and assassinate them. Whenever and the opposite happened, and then after the 30 Years' War, you got this situation where a bit like India and Pakistan, where you just got, I guess we'd call it balkanization now, but basically all the Catholics like went to like one place and the Protestants went to another place, and that sort of, stabilized for a while. I mean, I remember my mum was telling me that when she was young in Australia, like they were still like, don't talk to the Catholics. Like, I mean, you could say it tamped down on violence. I guess the point that you're trying to make is that liberalism provided an overarching framework within which both the Catholics and the Protestants could survive, but
well, not just survive, but thrive, work together.
Well, yes. I mean, my definition of survival is not having internecine warfare, like in that.
Yeah.
But it didn't force them to like each other, as it were, or really intermingle much. But it did.
Well, what do you think unified the West then? And when was the West unified? Was it post World War II? Is the longest period of peace in what we call the West, right? Would that be the case? And well, so you'd say that whatever unified that, the narrative structure, whatever that which defines the West.
I think what unified the West, honestly, was the British Commonwealth. And it's only really sort of gone downhill since World War II. I mean, like, okay, it has been a long period of peace, for the West. I mean, apart from all of the wars that got launched, but generally there haven't been any wars within the West itself. But most of that relied upon the framework that was established by the British Empire and then essentially taken over.
Okay, so what's that framework then? I mean, isn't that like basically liberalism, like Commonwealth?
Oh, for God's sake! Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. It was just a hiccup.
I don't know like why it's doing that. I mean, I guess it is liberalism, really. I guess I have to concede that point, but then I guess
Anglo-driven liberal values,
which then sort of became
in the American experiment. We accepted the Italians, the Germans. We increased the circle of acceptable, unity into this category of white.
Yep.
Which Dugin's gone after. I haven't read the articles, but he's pissed some people off about going after that construct of whiteness.
Yes, he does rather seem to have, gone into the whole like anti-white thing. It's I mean, I was rewatching a bit of your interview with Artie actually before because I wanted to get a bit of
Artie. Okay, no, Dugan.
No.
Let's go with Dukes. I've had Dukes on.
I know you've had Dugan on, but the way sort of when you were talking with Artie and you were asking him about identity, and he was just like, I don't know what that means, and I kind of it's kind of interesting because you were talking about white as an identity the way you were doing sort of just now, and now that identity is under threat, or the people that comprise that identity sort of broadly speaking are being sort of turned into a minority. There's a downgrading, I believe, is the sort of like technical political term for it, where you have a majority population that is sliding into a minority status. It's getting very, very, very spicy. And I wonder well, I think it is. Yeah, I think it is getting very spicy. I mean, in the UK, it's getting extremely spicy.
Oh, I don't know. Okay. Well, the UK. Yeah. I mean, America, we still have so much land. There's just so much space out here. I don't think people really comprehend that on Twitter. Like Twitter collapses space, but actual America is really spatially disparate. But yeah, I went to England, the UK. Sorry. No, England, technically. in early 2025 for the ARC conference, which was trying to define and resurrect or save the West. Judeo-Christianity, they said. Over and over and over. When they said Christianity, then they corrected themselves to include subsequent rungs of Christian adjacent identities. But yeah, it was startling. It was like, this is no different than Chicago. Like, this is basically, nobody gives a shit about these places. I went up and visited where Carl Benjamin's Lotus Eaters are. I can't remember the name of the city. It was so sad. What, Swindon? Swindon, yeah. I walked down the strip and it was just vape stores and phone stores and trash everywhere. It's like, nobody cares for this, but it's obviously a bunch of people were just transplanted there. They don't really care about it, or maybe they don't care about that kind of aesthetic where they do come from. But yeah, it's like, whoa, what's going on? Where are the people? I talked with Bo, history bro. Do you know him? He's a great guy. I gotta have him back.
I've been on a podcast. I think I was on Millennial with him, like briefly. Yeah, a lot of London is like that now, basically. Yeah. I mean, London is sort of, I guess, sort of two cities now, really. There's the nice parts, like where Arc was, you know, I mean, you know, the centers, like, still, you know, very, very nice, like St. James.
I wouldn't call it nice. I would call it just airport convention center, clean, but there's no character to it.
A lot of it is like that. You didn't go to the after party, did you?
No, like where all the cool kids gathered.
Yeah. Yeah, I was.
No, were you there? No, I had other commitments.
It had a very weird vibe. Like, just
really.
Yeah, I guess you would call it sort of big Judeo-Christian money. You know, like, it had a very, very just sort of strange kind of vibe that's sort of like hard to place. Like,
yeah, the money question is very pertinent.
It's weird to see that much money sort of deployed in such a small space. Yeah, London is just, it's in this sort of weird kind of like crisis, because the people controlling it are sort of, you know, I guess vociferously, you know, anti-racist, anti-fascist, you know, anti-white, all this kind of other stuff. And yet at the same time, they're still trying to pretend that they are liberal in sort of in the old sense, right? That, you know, everybody is given the same considerations. It's essentially the contradictions of it are, it's starting to actually like crack under its own contradictions, right? So you have this idea that under liberalism, you know, you give sort of like these special things, these special considerations to minorities to protect them from the majority, and then the minorities grow so large in power and influence and economics that they effectively become larger than the majority, but they still have all of these protections. And
the system doesn't adapt. Yeah,
they still have that victim mindset, and at the same time, they run these influence networks that are like. Let me give you a story about how like crap works in London. Okay. A lot of London now functions sort of effectively like somewhere like Bangladesh. So if you want to, for example, book a driving test, okay, you can't get one from the government anymore, because you now have these networks of Indian and Bangladeshi guys and gals that they spawn camp the website and they buy up all of the slots. Okay. And then if you want a slot to get a driving test, you have to go on like a WhatsApp group. You have to give out all of your information, and they will like book it for you and charge like an insane fee on top.
Yeah.
And this is how this kind of stuff works in the third world, right? And there's a lot of, you know, inherent bribery and all this kind of other stuff. And a lot of the English are essentially trapped in this sort of like weird in-between phase where functionally what's happened is that society has moved much more into, say, like the USSR model, right? Where if you want to get something out of someone in government, you are expected to pay a bribe. But they don't know who it is that they have to pay or anything like that. Whereas all of the people within these networks, they know exactly who to contact. They know exactly who to pay. They know exactly how to like get stuff done. It's a very, very, very weird situation.
Well, yeah, and I just don't see how it reverses course at all. I mean, you say it's spicy, but I mean, there was some burning of some trash cans a few months ago what was it, or was that even just a year ago? Actually, a year and a half. I mean, in the fall of, I guess, 2024.
You say the worst thing that happens in London is trash cans getting burnt.
Oh no, I mean, besides all the rapes, that's kind of like a reverse Norm McDonald, but from the what was it called, the heritage English, like what are they doing? Like, what are they doing to reverse course? What are they doing to have any sort of political will? Because they're captured by British politeness. Actually, that's what I figured. Like, why they're letting this happen? They don't have any ladders to leadership. But you say things are getting spicy, but are they? Like, how is things getting spicy besides like the rapes, right? Which are not being committed by the
stabbings and the occasional riots and stuff like that. I think it's not quite so much politeness as the sort of communist adjacent anti-racist networks that are sort of gatekeeping anyone who wants to sort of make a change out of power. Like this is a very, very real phenomenon. So Reform, who are the I guess the right-wing party, you have like Restore that are sort of, further right-wing. Reform, they work with Hope Not Hate, which is a well-known communist organization, to vet their candidates, right, and make sure that they haven't had any, said anything spicy and stuff like that. Because the assumption, probably a correct assumption actually, is that if they have said anything spicy, then if they get into power, someone will dig up the fact that they said something spicy. Oh my God, you did a racism or whatever, and they will then be ejected from power. But the upshot of this essentially is, like, it's not politeness that frames all sort of opinion in this way. It is a deliberate selection process by these groups that are essentially squatting on the avenues to power, basically, right? And because these rules differ markedly depending on your ethnicity, I think this is one of the reasons, for example, like a lot of people have criticized Reform because they have like a lot of Muslim and Indian candidates. But this sort of makes sense because Muslim and Indian candidates are not really held to the same speech standards, if that makes sense. Like, no one is going to deselect say like an Indian candidate because they said mean things about the Pakistanis, or vice versa, right? Like, that's not really regarded as racism the way if a white person said disparaging things about the Pakistanis or the Indians, if you get what I'm saying. So
yeah,
it's not, I don't think it's politeness at all. I think it's a well engineered machine, and it's not allowing any corrective measure, really. Like what we're seeing, the local elections are on actually at the moment in England, and both Labour and the Conservatives are getting screwed. And what we're seeing is
by who?
Well, what we're seeing is an erosion of, the center in politics, and what the academics would call polarization, where you've got the Greens on one side, who are a weird unholy alliance between the Muslims, the white women, the race communists, the climate freaks, and all of those kinds of like people on the one side, and then Reform, who are sort of like the, I don't know, very brown remigrationists, if that makes sense, right? Like
HBD1 or something, like corporate techno. Oh no, remigrationists. So they do want to. There's Reform, and then is that the because there's like what, Rupert Lowe, and then there's this other guy who's a little bit edgier, who's kind of like a duke or a lord or something like that. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. But there's Reform, and there's something even stronger than Reform, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Reform
So
the strongest.
There's Reform, which is Nigel Farage's outfit, right?
Yeah,
and
Nigel Farage,
he is basically being sort of re-co-opted by the Uni Party, which used to be Labour and the Conservatives, but is now pivoting to encompass Reform. And then you've got Restore, which is Rupert Lowe, which is the actual sort of mainly white, mainly sort of remigrationist kind of like proper sort of we're gonna send a lot of people back position. But I don't know how popular they can become. I know a lot of people are very passionate about Restore, and I really like them, but I fear it may, demographically speaking, just be too late. That you will never, like, even if, as people say, Britain is still majority white, you're never going to get all of the whites to like jump the same direction at once. It just, again, sort of going back to liberalism, right? They, instead of having an ethnic dimension to their sort of in-group organizing, it's always a sort of ideological dimension. You have the commies and the fascies and the, I think ethnicity has been downplayed so hard under the white population. The powers that be are very, very concerned that it's coming back, but simultaneously they're not concerned about it in any other group. So for example, the UK, I only really use that term disparagingly, has been caught up in a fever recently, a mooish fever, basically, right? There was a stabbing in Golders Green. Golders Green is like, the mooish ghetto in London. I mean, it's not a ghetto in the sense that it's run down or anything like that, not in that sense, but it is the mooish area of London, right?
Yeah.
It turns out that the guy who did it was like a mentally ill Somalian guy. There's a lot of that going around, mentally ill Somalians doing like crazy stuff. He was like let out of a mental hospital and stabbed his roommate, and then went up to Golders Green Road and stabbed a couple of moos. Neither of them died, but the way the government responded to this was so hysterical. Like, it's just like, oh my God, we send in the army, send in the SAS. Keir Starmer came out and he's like, we must protect the Mooish community, and all of the whites are just like, bruh, you didn't do any of that. You never do any of that stuff when it's us. Like, they don't. I mean, this is what I mean about it getting spicy. I think the fundamental sort of planks of liberalism, right, are starting to collapse, because it was never, I don't think it was ever real. All I see is minority groups pursuing particularist policies and particularist worldviews while espousing universalism, as long as it gets to their objectives. Because a lot of the people from these countries, they don't believe in universalism like at all. It's just not a feature. If you go to India or you go to Pakistan or Nigeria or Kenya, none of these countries are universalist in that sense. They're all tribalist, right? Like, places like Kenya are like, renowned for this, right? If someone from your tribe gets into government, what they do is they grasp the machinery of government and they direct all of those resources towards benefiting their tribe and screwing over the other tribe. And so I think this is what is happening. This is sort of the death of liberalism, I guess you'd call it.
Well, where does it go? That's my question. I mean, other than people whinging about it online, I mean, what are the possible alternatives? I mean, I guess there's exit. Just depopulate the place, like cede it to the barbarians, right, and come over to America.
Yes, I mean, it's certainly an option.
Is there at all a brain drain at all? And then, but there's also economic, like global economic factors. Like what is squeezing Britain? What is Britain's export? What's its relationship to the energy infrastructure? Like, what does it need and what does it have to give? And then how are those pressures going to make it manipulatable or independent from that which is already manipulating it?
Well, its primary sort of economic driver is things like finance, administration. They've got a name for it. It's not making stuff, right? And the country has deindustrialized massively. And then they got the green thing. There's this crazy motherfucker called Ed Miliband, who is like the sort of the energy moo. Essentially, he's been given control of the entire energy system of the UK. But it's nothing new. The Conservatives were doing it as well. They've shut down tons of like coal plants and oil fields, and well, they haven't shut them down. What they've been doing basically is taxing them all at like 75% in the hope that they shut down, they go bankrupt by themselves, and they won't have to say, oh, we shut it down. But that's clearly the goal. And with the war in Iran sort of like squeezing, it is putting pressure on. I don't really know what's going to happen about that, actually. I mean, supposedly we all run out of jet fuel in June, I think it is, so next month. But the government is not acting as though that's going to happen. So I don't know whether they've got a secret plan on the down low, or whether they're just don't say anything, you'll spook the plebs, you'll start like panic buying, and unlike COVID, we don't want that this time. This is what I mean. I feel like there's like a confluence of things sort of moving towards a sort of spicy core, but I'm not like, so back in the 70s they had a thing called the winter of discontent, which coincided with the 70s oil shocks, right? So you had a Labor government, you had really, really high inflation. This pushed up the price of everything, and then you got all the unions demanding like higher wages, which pushed inflation higher, and then more strikes, and no. And the country sort of like basically shut down for a bit, and it caused the fall of the government, which this is actually why like Margaret Thatcher got in. I hope I'm getting that right. But it was a big deal in the English psyche. But back then, the country was mostly ethnically homogenous. I mean, to be fair, there was like massive division between, I guess you'd call it like the labor class and the upper class. But I would argue that the racial and particularly language divide, this is one of the other things a lot of people don't appreciate. The language divide in London is severe. Like when you're out, the likelihood that you will meet someone else who speaks English well is declining sort of precipitously. I mean, obviously it depends exactly where you go, but
which is funny because British, the British people have always granulated their social status by accent. They all spoke the same language, but your accent would peg you on a certain social order. But now that like that now they're just like accepting all these just other languages. I wonder if there's still that classist British. I mean, I'm an American, so we're kind of classed in a certain way, but class is kind of a foundation of the British ethnicity and has been for a really long time. So I wonder how that's shaking out, evolving, devolving, along with all these other effects that you're talking about.
I think what you've had is a reorganization of class based essentially on virtue signaling, really, right? And rather than wielding things like economic clout or lineage or property, right? Being like, hey, yes, I'm Lord such and such. I have a nice mansion in the Cotswolds, and it's been in my family for 200 years. Who the fuck are you, right? Instead, it has become, I'm so incredibly woke. Look at all the money I've given to like the climate, and look at all the things that we've done to help the world, and look at all the poor Africans that we've like brought over. So you've got a new status hierarchy, essentially just revolving around virtue signaling and around, well, obviously progressive virtue signaling, because there doesn't seem to be really any other kind. And this signaling allows you to mask questions of economic class, basically. You know what I mean? Right? So you just get this whole sort of like situation based on how woke people are.
What about the young men? Do you have a line on them? I mean, like, what are the political factions or the political energy? Where is the political energy that could be tapped for a Britain for Britain's sake sort of movement?
Well, I don't know. There's I mean in London, you know, a overwhelming majority of the young men are, you know, not from here, right? So I guess it's going to break down into either sort of, you know, being for like Labor or the Greens, you know, more immigration, more Gibbs, or I guess some of them might vote for reform, sort of saying, you know, I moved here, but we don't want any more migrants. You've got a big Muslim bloc, like huge, like not I mean, not quite so much numbers, although it is huge, but just that they are free to organize in a way that the whites aren't. Number one, they have a sense of purpose that I think some of the whites might be getting it back, but again, in London, there's too few of them. It seems to me like they have that sort of sense of purpose, that sort of like religion, that sort of in-group preference. They've got language bonds. A lot of them, like they have those informal networks, like I was talking about, that increasingly allow them to get stuff done. They frequently just push the police around. You see this all the time, basically. You know, something will kick off and am I back?
Yeah.
Am I back?
You just blinked. Yeah, it's a blink. It was a blink.
Like they'll basically just push the police around. So if the police come up against them, they'll treat the Muslims with kid gloves because they can, you know, they act as like a force. They can be very, very violent. But they will essentially oppress the whites because it's just much easier. And I think as well, because there's more of a cultural understanding between the police and the whites. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, man. I really don't know. I just see it becoming more and more destabilized. And if it continues going the way it is, the entire, well, cities like London will just evolve into informal racial networks. Really. Right. Where, you know, the way to get anything done, the way to get an operation on the NHS will be, you know, somebody's uncle's brother. You go and you slip them a couple of £100 and, you know, and they book you into the system. You know, you want to get the police off your back. You do this, like, no. And all of the liberal whites are going to be left outside of this system, still imagining that the country works the way that it used to, you know, and yeah. So I don't know.
Man, it's very demoralizing. I mean, and this is the interesting question, and I brought this up a lot in my conversations with other people. It's like this whole topic is going to be decided by two case studies. Like, how does the West articulate ethnic solidarity, or at least ethnic dominance, and you have the case study of the UK and you have the case study of Israel. So what can the UK learn from Israel, in your opinion?
Well, I can tell you a few things that the UK can learn from Israel. Number one, don't let people of a different religion become your ruling class. But that ship sailed a long time ago in the UK. I mean, well, I mean, I do a history podcast, and I was looking into the history of the moose in England, and there's like a fascinating episode. I think it's like 1885, somewhere around there, where the moose, they've gotten readmitted and they want to become members of parliament, and they're being opposed in this endeavor by the high Tories, who are like a group in the House of Lords. And every single objection that the high Tories give, because the issue basically is that the moose don't want to have to swear on the Bible in order to be admitted to being a member of parliament, which of course you had to do. And the Tories are saying, listen, if we stop doing this, you know, what's going to be next? What, we're going to have Mohammedans in parliament, right? Because the whole conception at the time was that parliament had to be Christian, or you obviously had to be white. You just didn't have that many non-whites there. And every single concern has in fact come true. It's crazy to look back on it and just see, and you know, this group of high Tories sort of rolled back. It was called the Jew Bill. I think the Jewish Normalization Bill. And and then they all sort of within the next, I don't know, few years sort of declined in influence, and then they came back and they got it through. And I mean, the Israel would never allow themselves to be ruled by a bunch of Christians or by a bunch of Muslims. Like, I know that there are, they have like some Muslims in their parliament, something they're very, very proud of, like they're a little minority, but there is no way that they would let themselves be ruled by a foreign religion. And this question that people like Connor Tomlinson keep bringing up, although it was knocking around on 4chan for like a long time before that, of, well, if Israel can have effectively an ethno-state, 80% ethno-state, why can't England have it? And I think honestly it's just because they're Moorish, right? Like they view themselves in a very, very different way. They're like, well, of course you can't have it, right? That would impede our plans. We must be able to go anywhere. We must be able to trade with anyone. We must be able to do anything, lend money to anyone, right? Like take whatever fees, blah, 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 blah. But we must also have a place that is uniquely ours, right? So we can have a place that's uniquely ours, but you cannot have a place that keeps us out. And if you look at the way the argument proceeded, you see a lot of the buzzwords that were later applied to the US civil rights movement, words like emancipation and stuff like that, and human rights and freedom of religion was a big one. So to go back to your earlier point, they leveraged the idea that, well, we have freedom of religion for the Catholics and the Protestants. Why can't we also have it for the Moors? Well, they're very different. Like, whatever ideological, religious.
Well, how would you police religion? How would you do something other than freedom of religion? Like in today's today, I guess you don't have freedom of religion because you can't pray outside of a abortion clinic now. So you aren't free to be a practicing Christian in certain respects in your country. So I guess they are expending resources to clamp down on Christianity, but not other religions. But I just don't see how you would scale up the opposite of freedom of religion. Like, would you just have you can be Jewish, but you got to keep that under wraps? Like, how would you design a world where
the way it worked historically is pretty simple. Basically, you could not get access to serious power unless you were a Christian. So that's basically how it worked. That's why they had stuff like you have to swear on the Bible. So you were just gate kept out of any position of power. And the idea was that Christians should only be ruled by other Christians. It was seen as very, very dangerous to have other religions ruling over Christians. I mean, this is sort of, again, an extension of the idea that you shouldn't have Protestants ruling over Catholics and you shouldn't have Catholics ruling over Protestants, right? And this goes back to the basic idea of the nation state, really, if you sort of think about it, the idea that the ruler and the ruled should have more or less the same outlook. Otherwise, you're going to get a tyranny, essentially. How can it be otherwise? If your ruling class is of a completely different disposition, ethnicity, and religion to the people that they're ruling over, then by definition, it's going to devolve into a tyranny.
Yeah, that's the only way to keep it in line. But I guess, because if the Ashkenazi Jews is that a bad word on your channel? Jewish?
I don't know. I just started using like Moo as an alternative because I don't know. Well, I don't know.
In a meritocracy, you're going to have highly intelligent people rise to the top, and that is an issue with the civil rights outlook or the blank slatist outlook in my country, where we're trying to, for whatever reason, people are trying to diversify the upper management to be more representative of the demographic outlook of the of the populace, like in CEOs, and it started with the sex thing, like we need more women. It's interesting. I listen to a lot of board game podcasts, and academic, podcasts, and to hear these guys say we need more women in this thing, it's just like, that's weird. Why do you care? Why do you care about that identity marker? But I understand, like, in a certain
Because women are more
world, like,
easily led. Right, women are more emotional, right? They are more susceptible to progressive arguments, right? They're more
yeah,
biddable.
but why would you want more women in power? Like, just like as a
Because
blank.
they're not in power. They are
Oh,
like they believe they are in power, but they are molded by the
yeah.
people who are actually in power, who create the rails upon it. It's like you put a woman at the front of a train and you
This sounds like
convince
the beginning of
her
a wonderful fantasy.
and you convince
Okay.
her, you're the driver of this train, but they're not really the driver of the train, because the train is on rails for a start, right? And the speed is controlled from like a central command unit, right? But
Mhm.
the woman in question is like, yeah, well, I'm a train driver, and it's like, yes, dear, you're so incredibly empowered, and no,
Yeah.
that's why I think, and also to your point about meritocracy, right?
Yeah.
By what yardstick is this merit measured? Because this is something I never hear. Right? Everyone's like, oh, a meritocracy. It's just money, isn't it? It's just money. It's
The ability to, well, work hard and to, I mean, so if you look at Jewish ascendancy, not necessarily supremacy, but ascendancy in all levels of governance, finance, media, like all the things that they are criticized for controlling. It's just they have a very strong work ethic.
Mhm.
They're rather, they're highly intelligent, so they're able to plan, and think ahead and articulate things, and play around with debt, not go into debt, like steer ships. So they're very competent. And also, I guess the other criticism, you can't really criticize them for being competent. The criticism that is stickiest, or can stick the most, is that they are always operating in a clannish manner, and they will always give opportunity to their ethnic cohort. So then once they populate these upper echelons, then they keep on populating more and more of these echelons, because they have ethnic solidarity. They work in terms of clannishness. Whites could do that too, but it's called nepotism when we do it. But that aside, just pure competence. So a system, a society that facilitates competence as the measure for success will have probably have the most success of a
right.
society that facilitates something else. And
And
so you're going to have to, I don't know why focusing over much on Jewish representation in these upper echelons is any different than over obsessing on male representation
but
in
these
these.
societies are not successful, right? Look at what is happening, right? Like,
Hmm.
everyone in the West is acting as though the West is successful the way it used to be, right? These networks, these ideologies have not produced optimal outcomes. In fact, the West is declining as a result of these networks and these outcomes. I would add one other thing that the Moos, in my opinion, have an advantage of, which is that they are not, and also the other ethnic groups that you see in London, they are not shackled by the kind of weird sort of, I don't know what you would call it, thought chains, right? Like the thought terminating cliches, all the folderol and mental baggage that a lot of the whites have accumulated since the end of World War II. It's you can talk to like a lot of them. It's crazy. They can barely hold a coherent thought, because the extreme of this sort of thought pruning, it's like an AI that's had too much like alignment training, and it can't even complete a thought, because it gets halfway through a thought and it's like, oh, well, I can't think that, or oh, that's privilege, or this, that, or the other.
Mhm.
And I don't see that from the Moorish population at all. Like the ones I know, they've got a very, very good grasp of history. They've got a very, very good grasp of like the long term. And I don't find many
Mhm.
whites who have that, particularly in terms of history. Um, a lot
Yeah.
of it is very, very, very blunted. This is actually one of the reasons why I'm really into Jewish history, because it's bloody fascinating, and it's, it has such an incredibly long sort of continuous arc, and it's much less self-apologetic than the way a lot of whites do history, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, because they can point to empirical fact that they have been victimized. So any sort of victim, just the way that narrative works, at least in the West, in the Christian West specifically, the victim is given affordances for that thing that we call pride. The aggressor is not allowed to have pride, which is interesting. We'll see how this Christopher Nolan Odyssey movie shapes out, if it's actually a representation of Western masculine pride and the complexities of that relationship, ownership, authority. But yeah, and then Jewish history is also interesting.
I don't think that's true.
I was just saying that, like, being apologetic, you don't have to be apologetic for, being holomodored, right?
I guess. Well, I mean, certainly not in the modern West. I don't know. I get the sense. I mean, when I read Moorish history, I don't get the sense that they see them. I mean, there is some victimization, but the general sense I get actually is this sort of overcoming of adversity, rather than sort of a victimization sort of thing, right? We're still alive, we're still here, we've been around for like thousands of years. The West, whites generally, could also very, very easily have this narrative, but they are highly discouraged from doing so. And I
has that ever been a part of? I mean, on the individual level, Christianity and I guess Greco-Christianity prizes the individual overcoming adversity. The group overcoming adversity, I guess you see stories of that, but that doesn't seem to be a very foundational myth in the West on a group level. Like, we're much more individual adversity overcoming rather than group adversity. Like, as a people, we don't think of ourselves as a people, and so it's kind of odd. Maybe we do. I don't think we do, but we're trying to now, because like the walls are closing in on us as a people. So thinking of ourselves as a people is back on the menu, so to speak. But what is the foundational myth of the West, of the Gentile, of the non-Jewish Westerner?
Well, Christianity, and Christianity is really a story of the early church overcoming adversity as a group. I mean, okay, sure, there are a lot of individual stories in that. But I don't think
all of the stories are encoded as individual, like an individual sacrifices his life or her life. The stories of the martyrs are granular on the individual level. Christ as a person is a representation of an individual taking on tremendous debt, or God as an individual. Like that's a profound concept. God is an individual, and was an individual, and will continue to be an individual similar to us. But yeah, I think that individualism is much more foundational to our mythic and our mythopoetic outlook.
I mean, I guess
the Jewish history is more of, and it's defined by itself as a group within and among other groups over and over and over again. Like, the Bible is a story of a people. And when we get to Christ, you come to a person, and then the church happens, which is a mixture of the group, which transcends ethnicity, does it not? Does Christianity not transcend ethnicity and is unified through the individuality of Christ, and then back into the individual responsibility for the individual sin, and then also through that understanding that we are all part of the same body, but we're all personally responsible.
That's a very good point, actually. Generally speaking, Christianity, it does matter on the acts of the individual rather than the acts of the group. Maybe that's like where it comes from,
And that's why the idea of a Christian nationalism, I'm going to have Doug Wilson on to talk more about his vision of that, is kind of difficult to square, because how can you enforce Christianity? I mean, you can have Christian lawmakers and you have Christian laws, but you can't legalize Christianity itself. Like Jesus stood up against over and over and over again the legalistic forms of religion and the political forms of religion. So it's interesting to try to square that. And so UK I don't know if Christianity would be the vehicle by which the UK gains, one, its cojones, and two, its love for itself over
no, but like legalism is not the same as having laws, right? Legalism is, I mean, particularly the kind of legalism that Jesus was fighting against was a particularly Moorish phenomenon where you had a billion laws that govern every single aspect of your life. You see this also in Islam as well, if you want to take it that far, right? There's a law for how you brush your teeth and how you wipe your butt and all this kind of like other stuff, right?
Orthodoxy has a lot of feasts and but not a lot of laws. But my stepdaughter's Orthodox, and they're always having something going on. It's kind of like approaching Jewish, and the amount of
I don't know.
The year has, time has a high supreme amount of order in that religion.
Yeah, but it's
not
also
necessarily behavioral laws.
No one's forcing you, right, to like attend the feasts, right? It's not like if you're
let alone God, like God has given the Jews those laws, like you have to follow these laws, everybody else has to follow 7, you have 130, whereas Christians are still expected to attain virtue and to seek virtue within any given act, but the acts aren't codified to the extent
because like virtue is an inner direction of action that sort of in a sense transcends laws, because you can't make a law for every single situation. This is one of the reasons why highly legalistic societies always get themselves into trouble, because you can't make a law for every situation. It's far better to have a virtuous people who in their heart are trying to do what is right on sort of basic sort of principles, because you're always going to come up to a situation where, a law doesn't cover it. And if you try and make a law for like every single little thing, then the law quickly becomes so large and interminable that you develop a class of lawyers who interpret and inevitably subvert that law. And then those people essentially become like a new priesthood, which is, basically what you've got in the UK, really, like, and the laws become unenforceable. They don't make any sense. They separate from virtue entirely, because it doesn't really matter. This is another thing about Christianity, is that the intention of the act really matters, where under legalism it doesn't matter at all. It just matters whether you follow the letter of the law. Your intention is basically sort of secondary, if you get what I'm saying.
Well, what was that? Your guitar coming out?
No.
It sounded like an instrument. Boom.
No. Don't know what that was.
So what do you how is your historical project? Where are you, what are you formulating, or what are you finding, what are you discovering that you are formulating? Like what are you not just learning? I want to know what you're learning, but like what are you watching grow as you participate in this project? Like what is
I don't really. I'm finding basically that Moorish history is very long and complicated. Number one, finding number two that you cannot understand European history without it. You can't, right? Like trying to complete a jigsaw puzzle without like a third of the pieces, right? Like if you leave Moorish history out of European history, there's a whole bunch of crap that really makes no sense, right? You have to understand in order to get a complete sort of view of European history, and that Gentiles have been widely discouraged from looking into this, despite the fact that, I mean, this is the thing that always like weirds me out. No one ever says to the Moors, oh, it's inappropriate for you to study Gentile history. Quite the opposite. You know what I mean, right? But the idea of a Gentile studying Moorish history is somehow not right and sort of like frowned upon and stuff. But it's honestly really fascinating.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of, frankly, bullshit involved as well. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be like very, very much like made up. And so I was covering been covering this book, the wondrous deeds of the Maharal and the Golem of Prague, I think it's called, by this guy Yodel Rosenberg.
Mm.
And a lot of the modern version of the Golem is basically based upon this, right? It came out in 1909 or something, I think. And he basically said that he dug it. It was a 300-year-old manuscript, and he dug it up from like a library in Germany somewhere. No, he just made it up. And it's so obvious when you read it that it was made up. It's definitely not a medieval text in any way, shape, or form. And it's this sort of like weird, hallucinatory, almost sort of Harlequin romance kind of depiction of life in Prague in like the 1600s, when the Maharal, who's the guy who legendarily like made the Golem, is supposed to be about. And I don't know, there's something really fascinating about historical fabrications, because
Mhm.
it reveals a lot of the mindset of the people who wrote them. Because if you're making history up, it's always going to reflect that part of you that imagines the motivations of those actors in history, if that makes sense, right? As opposed to the actual historical, record, right? Where the motivations might not be known, or the public statements of historical figures may be like lies, or
Mhm.
yeah, it's very, very strange. It's very strange, like the way he characterizes Christians. So like the whole blood libel thing in Prague, according to him, was basically Christians going around digging up the bodies of Christian children and then throwing them through windows into Moorish homes so that they could frame them for blood libel.
Mhm.
It's very, 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 very weird. Very, very weird book. You wound up interviewing
Hmm.
me again, Ben. You're just
I'm better than you at listening.
I see. There you go.
But you said something interesting. What does Jewish history teach us about what it is to be a Gentile?
Um, I think it teaches us a
Or
couple.
maybe even specifically an Anglo, since we're both Anglos.
Well, in terms of being an Anglo, the first thing is that you cannot divorce Moorish history from Anglo history, okay? Because it starts when they come over with the Normans in 1066. They are installed as sort of exploitative tax collectors, essentially.
Hmm. Oh.
They are given special privileges. Like I
What
think
is what is the Normans' relationship to the Jews? Like, are
the
they kind of
Normans the Normans were French, and they were
yeah?
probably financed in their invasion by the Moorish bankers. That's not 100% confirmed, but given the amount of money that they made off it, this would be a reasonable assumption, because they were
Hmm.
brought over as essentially tax farmers. Um, so there's a thing called the Domesday Book that is, sort of big cheese in English history. And what it is basically is when the Normans came over, they sent people out to catalog every single thing that they could find in England so that they could tax the crap out of it, right?
Hmm.
Um, and unlike the serfs, the Moors were the king's men, so they could go anywhere, they could buy and sell anything. They had like no restrictions. A Gentile could not accuse a Moo unless they had like 20 witnesses or something crazy like that. And you wound up with a situation, I think, like 50 years after this system was introduced. As a group, they had more money than the king. They introduced, widespread usury, high interest rates, lots of bankruptcies, and this
Mhm.
fomented a lot of public backlash, pogroms, and then that resulted in the expulsion in, oh my god, I should really know the exact date, but I can't remember. I think it was somewhere like 14.
But so they expelled the Jews, but not the Normans.
No, because I think by that point, the Normans had essentially integrated into England, whereas the Moors kept themselves apart, as they are wont to do, right? Like they don't ever really integrate. I mean, some of them do, right? There's that big argument that where the Moors who do not integrate sneer at the ones who do, and say, like, you know, they're fake and they're gay and they're giving up their Moorishness by integrating into wider society, and they will disappear. Yeah, it's a weird, fascinating tale. So yeah, they get expelled. England then sort of has sort of like a, you know, kind of golden age, you know, Shakespeare, all this kind of like stuff, and then Cromwell lets them back in because of the rise of Protestantism, and this guy Meshai ben Israel comes around and he says, you know, we've discovered the 13th tribe of Israel, and the lost tribe of Israel, and it's actually the American Indians. So therefore, the only place on earth where the Moors are not allowed is England, and the Messiah, you know, Jesus, can't come back until the Moors are allowed in every place in the earth. That was like literally the argument. And so, you know, there was a lot of like, and so yeah, so Cromwell let them back in, and then they slowly gained, you know, what they called emancipation, where they sort of became able to like hold high office and stuff. There was a lot of resistance originally.
But are you aware of how the Jewish outlook has been in dialogue with the Anglo outlook? Like, to what degree? You're talking about historical facts, but I'm talking about like the character of what would eventually become the UK. How has that been in? How can we learn about that by its relationship to or influence upon and through Judaism?
Well, it has definitely enhanced liberalism, right? As I said earlier, the freedom of religion thing was pivotal. Financialization, trade, all these kinds of like other stuff. I don't know whether you can say that a lot of it. I mean, I guess you had this thing called British Israelism, which I haven't sort of really looked too much into, but this is like sort of a modern phenomenon where like, you know, it was like a weird sort of we was Kangs, you know, the English are the real Israelis and stuff. It had an effect on like the church. I don't know. I mean, it sort of, it sort of like seeped in, I guess, into everything. You know, it started sort of blunting these sort of like anti-Moorish parts of Catholicism. Obviously, I really need to like find like a book or something, or like a biography of someone who was like living through that time, and maybe like their thoughts. That would be really, really interesting, but I haven't come across one yet. You know? Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, you said you grew up Pentecostal, right?
Yeah.
Was it,
we banged around a lot of churches?
Was it like hardcore Pentecostal, like the whole speaking in tongues and like the handling and stuff?
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, it's always kind of a little weird, you know, to have some guy mumbling next to you as a kid, you know, blah, 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 blah. But I went to a Bible camp when I was 10, and I don't think I was indoctrinated at all. You know, I don't remember any like indoctrination, but I do remember a worship service where the spirit became very real to me, and I erupted in just a ebullition of praise and an infusion of a feeling of deep and expansive and fiery love of and from God. So that the reality of God as a force has always been clear and near to me. The expression of that in the Pentecostal manner, I don't participate in anymore. I mean, I do, my own spiritual group practice is very similar to Pentecostalism, but there's no it's non-dogmatic, and there's no director. It's just a direct receiving that happens coincidentally with other people. I mean, men and women are separated, but other than that, it's just free form. But that is another level of the outwardly it looks like Pentecostalism. You're singing, you're walking around, you're just letting your body move, or just following the guidance as it presents itself to you. But internally, it's a lot less emotional than it's certainly like as a flavor or as a feeling, it's less intense, less emotional than what I've been exposed to and experienced in Pentecostalism. Christianity broadly, at least Protestant Christianity, is very emotional. Like that, the emotion takes the place of what the Catholics and the Orthodox have with ceremony and icons and the senses, right? So the Protestants stripped away all of that fanfare, and then they replaced it with an emotionality that can kind of edge into Jesus is my boyfriend kind of sing-alongs. The sincerity of judgment of the quality or the depth of the religious experience in Protestantism or traditional Christianity notwithstanding. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying as an experience, Protestantism tends to use emotionality because it doesn't have a lot of the frameworks and the guideposts that Catholicism and Orthodoxy have.
Interesting. So it's sort of a like a trad version of Pentecostalism.
My spiritual practice.
Yeah.
It's called Subud. And it was founded by a man who was a Muslim in Indonesia in the 1924. And he just had a series of direct experiences that were very intense for him. And then eventually people started to seek him out because they were guided to ask him to receive the same contact. And in 1957, he hooks up. He's found by Hussein Rofi, who is connected to this guy named John Bennett, who's an Englishman who was very he was the successor of this other guy named Gurdjieff.
Yeah, I know who Gurdjieff is. Yeah,
you know Gurdjieff.
Yeah,
insanely intense guy. I don't know too much about it, but Gurdjieff had set up this network of people who were seeking some sort of very direct spiritual experience. And Gurdjieff died, and Bennett kind of inherited the estate. He's a very rich man, Bennett was. And Bennett, one of Bennett's close friends, found this guy in Indonesia called Pak Sumu Hadiwajoyo. And Hussein Rof told Bennett about it. Bennett met with Pak Subu and then invited Pak to England. And Pak just means Mr. We call him Bapak, which just means grandpa. I never call him by his actual name, Sumo Hadiwajoyo, Pak Subu. I just call him Bapak.
So it's Hinduism, or it's sort of a syncretic Hinduism Buddhism kind of mix? Like,
no, this is the thing. It doesn't have any teaching to it. It is a direct contact. Like when I found it, I was 21. Like the only way to communicate it to you is to tell you how it works for me. Because there's no dogma. I mean, there's guidelines and rules, but there's like in essence, it's a direct personal experience. And in 1998, I was presented with a choice spiritually in a very direct, like edge of madness manner, because I was messing around with forces that people shouldn't be messing around with, and pushing myself to try to find a certain layer of reality that I thought was beyond this normal mundane world. But I was pushing that envelope very far, and I was presented with a choice that I could either surrender myself to the will of God, or and in the process of surrendering myself to the will of God, lose myself and have to humble myself, or I could concentrate upon my own will And the trade-off there being that I could only go as far as my will could take me. And in the wake of being presented with that choice, which oddly enough, which probably undermines the whole thing from a storytelling point of view, but like it happened during a very terrible acid trip, like a very terrible acid trip where I started using that drug to mess around with some, light plugs, and I got shocked really bad.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think that drugs necessarily, drug experiences are usually more false than true, but every once in a while you can kind of mess up and turn the wrong corner, and you're like, oh shit, there is reality, and I'm not supposed to mess with this. Anyways, I was long story short, I found this group that just said there's this direct spiritual experience. There's no dogma, nobody's in your way. It's just between you and the source or whatever, and you contact us and have a conversation. And I met with these people, and I noticed something specifically about, well, it was me and a girl that I had known, that we were both kind of like on the edge of madness and just kind of trying to find reality. We were feeling a lot of energies and shit. Things were really crazy for both of us. We were both very crazy, but we met with a man, 2 men and a woman. And I looked at the woman and I saw something in her face that I'm like, oh, she's really close to home. Like she looks like she's close to home. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks later, they said, we met in Applebee's. Then there's like, well, we rent out a church, basically, twice a week we meet up at a church. We rent like these little spaces. The men go in one room, the women go into the other room, and we have 15 minutes of quiet. And then somebody says, stand, relax, begin. And then for a half an hour, we just follow our guidance. And then we sit down and have like 15 minutes of quiet time afterwards. And then we have a potluck and we drink tea afterwards. The men and women come back together. So I went up to the church and I sat outside the room, where the men were doing, it's called latihan, which is the Indonesian word for exercise. And latihan kejuan is the technical term. It means spiritual exercise. Like that's all it is in content. It's just a spiritual exercise. It's yourself training yourself to be yourself, or it's God initiating a process that is eternal. It's never ending, of purification, of preparation and perfection, which are terms that I'm borrowing from syncretic, and Islamic and Christian mysticism, because I'm always interested in the mystical side of things. But anyway, so I was sitting outside of the room and it was quiet. And so I was just like, I was drawing, and then somebody was like, oh, you should just relax. Just don't do anything. Just listen, just be attentive. The guy said while he was walking into the room. So I was sitting outside the room, and then I heard some shuffling, and I heard like a muffled begin. And then I heard like some men voices, kind of singing or chanting, everybody doing their own thing, and it not disharmonious, not discordant, but everybody being very their own selves, and all of a sudden I had this breaking open of myself, and I had to run into a closet because I just started crying. And I cried for like half an hour, like all this crap inside of me, all of this anger and shame and sadness, the sorrow, all this depression that I had been like wrestling with for a few years by that point, just like I was just throwing it all up, and it was going on and on and on. And then I just started feeling light, and I started laughing. I started like, oh my God, like I'm free, I'm free from that. I can, I'm free from that. And then I heard the guys get quiet in the next room, and I'm like, oh crap. And I came back to myself, and I found some tissue. I cleaned up, and I went back and I sat back on the chair, and they're like, okay, well, come in, like we could talk about this, and the guys had me in to talk about it. And I just argued with them for like half an hour, like Like, you guys have no idea what you're sitting on. They're like trying to tell me about the history and like the you know, like the like basic things about it. I'm like, no, I understand what this is. Like, do you guys understand what this is? Like, this is source. Like, this is home. This is as close as home as I've ever felt. Like, in church, I can get closer and closer to home, but this is, it's like the door to home is right there. And so like that, so that just initiated a process. And I, of course, as I to wrap up the story, it was true. I could either go with the path of surrender to God and to allowing God to work through me on just the basic level of my awareness, of my attention, of my emotions, or I could cling to my own will, my lusts, my hunger for marijuana, my hunger for lust, you know, for women, my hunger for will, for being a powerful, important person. And I tried to hold on to those two things, which eventually caused me to break again. And I had to go through a very deep reset and you know, initiate a process of becoming like a person rather than somebody who's trying to be a person.
Yeah, no, I get you. I mean, it's basically Buddhism as far as I can tell.
Oh no,
The
no.
passions
Well,
and
have you met the Buddha?
I can't say that I have. No.
Buddha's a different thing, man. Buddha's no, like, this is much closer to Christian. This is the line of Jesus. This is the same. I'm sorry. That's probably offensive. I do not mean to be offensive.
No. It's okay.
Buddhism is of this world. The line of the prophets, including Christ, Jesus, is of the Heavenly Father. Like, this is from source. This is from Adam. Like this is from Buddhism is just pure mind, which is, it's great. It's wonderful. Don't want to knock it. I knocked it and it knocked me back. So I don't want to slag on it, but it's not from source. It's from will. Anyways, but who am I? What do I know?
That's, man, I I haven't heard a story like that since I was back in the woo a long time ago, man. That's well, I mean, you know,
missed the woo?
No, fuck no. It was fucking horrible. Like,
really?
Oh yeah, my god.
Did it confuse you?
So many demons, man. I just couldn't hack it, dude. Like, it's one of the best things about Christianity for me personally. Is you know,
protected.
It battles all that kind of like stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of the similar principles, I guess, of, you know, fighting your passions and stuff. But there's I mean, one of the things about Orthodoxy and Catholicism as well is that there's a whole, it's essentially sort of like a ritual magic layer to it that is, you know, not generally appreciated. That is, you know, for someone who has a background like me, I sort of like really appreciate the I guess you would call it the spiritual technology aspect of it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Subud is not intended to be a replacement for religion. Actually, everybody's encouraged to find their religion, and because our religion is very important to us. It's usually our religious ancestors that bring us to a place where we inherit, along with our intelligence and our chronic illnesses, we inherit our love of God. We inherit that from our ancestors, or our even our hatred of God. We bear that too. So our spiritual life is the continuation of a conversation that our lineage is having with God or against God, right?
That sounds very close to transmigration, to be honest.
Reincarnation.
What do you mean? Reincarnation. You into that?
I think that the universe is vast, man. So I hope that I don't. Well, you know what? If I have to live again, because I didn't succeed this time, you know, it's beyond me to say. Maybe I'll need to live again. But I mean, do you think, like, once we're done with this life, we just check out and go to a condo in heaven and like tool around for the rest of eternity? I mean, like, isn't there not infinite amount of lessons that one has to learn
I
about
don't really know.
life.
I haven't died yet. So, you know,
Yeah.
obviously I have my faith, and, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I hope that is
Yeah,
correct.
but
But
I do believe it's not transmigration. I do believe that our ancestral debt, like Christianity frames it as original sin, but I think it's very granular, depending on our actions. The actions of our father, our grandfather, great grandfather are incurred debts and gifts that we bear in our life, and that we pass on if we're gifted to have offspring. I think so. It's not necessarily transmigration, but it is familial debt or abundance that passes on, just as it is in the material world. It's the same in the spiritual world. The material world is an analog. It's like the other side of a leaf of the spiritual world. They're very similar in how they operate, how they make sense, in my opinion.
interesting. No, that's man. Well, I obviously I have a very, very different view of it, but, you know, that's
No,
fascinating, man.
you don't. What would you think? Like, it's our connection to God is not impacted by our, like, it's the foundation of Christian doctrine is original sin.
Yeah, but that original sin is baked into every person by the fact that
And it's all the
we
same.
have no, but by the fact that we have passions, essentially, right? And it is the inability to control those passions that lead to sin. Like, that's basically what sin is, right? At least in the Orthodox perspective, it is the inability to control your passions. That's why
Yeah.
so much of Orthodoxy is focused on things like fasting and stuff as ways to control your passions, under the assumption that inability to control your passions is what makes for bad outcomes, basically.
Mhm.
You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Doesn't
Um,
Christ say, like, the sins of the father up to the seventh generation? I mean, it just seems obvious to me that our spiritual debt and gifts are the product of the choices of our ancestors. I mean, does that not make sense of any sort of inclination to think of in terms of ethnicity of a people? Is that this people has strengths and weaknesses, but they are my people. I'm an Anglo, and I inherit the history of the Anglos, and all the
sure,
choices that occurred within
but
that lineage are a part of what makes me up and makes me value the world, and incurs upon me a debt to continue that and to erect or to right that which is wrong in the past.
the general view of Christianity is that the reasons why the sins of the father come down to the son is that if enough people sin, it changes the society that they live in, right?
Mm,
So if you get a godly society, you get a bunch of people, they all follow, you know, the right principles. You have like a good society that is then left onto their children. They have a good society. But if they
hmm,
do bad things, right, and they sin a lot, and you get somewhere like, you know, Sodom and Gomorrah or London, right?
mhm.
Then the children born into that will suffer the sins of their fathers. Not that there is a sort of like blood
This
guilt
sounds
component.
this sounds so like Christianity is a personal religion and relationship. It sounds like you're talking about society, like it has no impact. Like there's no particular instance of your ancestors having an impact on your the debt that you have in the world on a spiritual level, or in the abundance that you inherit on a spiritual personal level. You're talking about in terms of society. You don't think that in the doctrine of the Orthodox Church there is no granular
No, because
inherited?
the principle
It's all
on
just the
no,
universalism
no,
of
no, no.
societal
The
level.
principle of Christianity is that it's up to the individual to be saved through a covenant with God, right? So it's not like because your father was a terrible person, you are impeded from your ability to seek forgiveness through Jesus Christ. That's a, you know, no, they don't believe that. No,
Okay, well, in terms of forgiveness, yeah, but I'm talking about in terms of debt, of spiritual process, of how easy it is to control your anger, how hard it is to control your lust, right? Those things are encoded on us based on the choices and the environment of our ancestors. Like those, all those choices impact us. I think it's very granular. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying on the level of forgiveness, on the level of society, but I'm just upgrading it a little bit to add this other dimension of personal purification and perfection.
you could say that the sins that your father into are more likely the kind of sins that you're going to be into, like in that sense, right? But not that there's no way to overcome them, right? Like that's like a lot of what Orthodox Christianity is about, is training you to resist your passions, like whatever they.
No, I really appreciate Orthodoxy because it takes that into account. Like it makes it personal. It's like it's your responsibility to do this.
Yeah.
And to work on this.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's it's worked well for me, right?
Good.
Help me a lot. It's weird that we both came from the world of woo, I guess, and wound up in very different places. I totally understand that, what you were saying about when you were doing a lot of acid and wound up in a really bad place. I've been there, mate. Like, yeah, really, really messed me up, all of that.
But you're much better now.
Yeah, well, I am, right? Like, Orthodox Christianity helped me a lot, actually. Just, incredible. Like, it's just, I mean, it's a very, very good moral and intellectual framework, right? Because sort of baked into it is the idea that, and this is the thing to talk about what you were saying about the sins of the father, right? Like, none of the stories about the saints are to do with their parents, right? So like there are a lot of Orthodox saints who are very, very terrible people, right? Murderers, prostitutes, who did terrible things. And then they came to Jesus and they mended their ways. So inherent in this idea is that you can be redeemed. It doesn't matter how much terrible stuff you've done. If you repent, you can change. And that's very, very cool, because the alternative is to lock people into this situation where you're like, I've been a terrible person. My life's been like terrible. There is no way out. And the only thing to do is just to continue to be a terrible person. And if you replicate that across an entire society, across an entire culture, you get very, very bad downstream effects. So I think one of the good things about Christianity generally is that it does provide that path for redemption and a way out for, because when you're young, it's very, very easy, and particularly if you grow up in an atheist materialist society, to not know what the hell you're doing and just stumble around, effectively bumping into things, right? And I mean, there like in Christianity, there are sort of two ways you can come at it, right? You can do the thing where you're like, you do know like what the church teaches, and you've got sort of the positive view, or you can do it the hard way, which is where you go and do all the things you're not supposed to do, and then eventually realize that all the stuff left is the good bit, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of there is some like name for it in Greek. I can't remember it. My Greek isn't great. Apathetic. That you can come to God by like basically doing all the bad things, and then realizing like, well, what if I started doing the good things instead? The only things that are left are the good things, essentially. Yeah. Well, we're at an hour and a half. Should we?
Yeah, no, I gotta head out. Yeah, that was. I'm glad it took the turn. It did.
Very interesting last half hour. Yeah,
it's fun to hang out with you. Hopefully we can hang out again. If people stumble upon your channel, they don't know mine. It's Benjamin A. Boyce on YouTube and Calmversations on podcasts. And I just do a lot of interviews with just a lot of different people.
Yeah, you should check out his channel. It's really, really good. And thank you, because your channel is so much more massive than mine. It's huge. It's thank you for coming to my small corner of the internet, Ben.
My pleasure, man. Right? I really enjoy hanging out with you and talking.
Likewise. All right, I'll speak to you later. Thank you so much, man.
Cheers.